Good evening, everybody.
Uh,
Welcome to our podcast.
we've never done this, so this is going to be fun to try to figure this out.
This is Jen.
And that's Phil.
We're happy to be here.
We're starting a podcast called More Than a Stone.
All right, let's
So,
do it.
a little bit about ourselves. Again, I'm Jen,
I'm Phil.
and I am here torturing Phil to do this podcast with me.
This is true. I am a cancer survivor. Not that that's a huge thing or anything, but I enjoy the outdoors and I enjoy going and looking at old headstones for some reason.
I am a Phil survivor going through the cancer, and he likes to go fishing but not catch fish. He likes to go hunting, doesn't ever bring anything home. We're always having to go to the store to get the meat. Anyways, let's get started on our first podcast. So,
More than a stone.
The sources we like to thank for this information today are UNT, the portal to Texas history, FamilySearch.org, and Harper Herald newspaper. More Than a Stone will be focusing on just one family today, but in the future, we might honor two or three during the podcast. It will take just this one episode for this family because they were so influential in the area. This journey all started when Philip and I recently took a trip to Fredericksburg to see the bluebonnets in April. I love bluebonnets.
Yes, she does.
We can drive and drive and drive, and I'll make him stop on the side of the road
This
and
is true.
take scary pictures with all the traffic around. Yes, that's me. Sorry guys for the traffic. I love bluebonnets and I love road trips, so why not take a trip? We found this cute and quaint cemetery along the highway on the main stretch of the road that day. It was a very cold day. I remember walking around the cemetery and we were so cold. And I was like, what are we doing? But I had to look at all the stones. I walked into the St. Mary Cemetery in Fredericksburg, Texas, and we went to a couple that day, but this one really caught my eye. This is when I thought about, wow, who are these people? What is the story that they bring to us? And so I got him involved and I said, we really should do a podcast, and let these people have their journey be known. Because there's so many cemeteries where I go and I drive around and they're completely empty. And these people mattered. The first stone I read and that I took a picture of is who the family we're talking about today. It was baby Leo Nebgen. Philip having his own experience with the baby passing away. Of course, this one caught my eye because we always go see his baby stone and it just speaks to you. This is where the whole journey began for this podcast, and he will always be the reason that this came to light. He may have only lived 11 days here on earth, but he is still inspiring all of us. Leo Nebgen was born on October 22nd, 1918. He passed away, sadly, on November 1st, 1918. The cause on the report is being said as no doctor on the death certificate. So we don't know why he passed away. We can only assume it must have been a birth defect or maybe he was ill. I just wonder what the grief the parents must have felt for this tremendous loss. I wanted to honor Leo's mother, Bertha, Mrs. Albert Nebgen, as I know she carried a lot of that weight from the loss. We will also speak some about his father, Albert, because he was such a great influencer and still is in that area. And I know Bertha, she had a lot to do with the success because I know as his wife how much we have to do to help. Leo's mother was born as Bertha Maida Jensky Nebgen to Joseph and Anna Marie on May 21st, 1896 in Gillespie County, Texas. She was the firstborn in the family. Bertha's parents were very religious, and she had her first christening just 7 days after her birth on May 28th. I think that's pretty incredible because just right after she was born, she had her christening.
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't think we always do that. So I think that's pretty awesome. I think we wait sometimes a couple months, sometimes a while. So it was great to see that back in the day, they actually, took a record of it. When Bertha was 2, she became a big sister to Thekela. At 4, they welcomed baby Adolphe. At 6, she welcomed baby Lydia as her sister. At age 9, baby Alvin. Age 11, baby Bruno. Age 14, baby brother Lawrence. And at age 15, baby Hilmar. Age 18, baby Alois. And to complete for her 9th sibling, this was a big family.
Huge family.
Her 9th sibling, Carl, was born when she was 20. So she helped raise those kids all the way up until she was, I don't know, probably still a mother herself. Bertha learned to become an incredible mother as she watched her mom with her siblings. It would only be natural that Bertha wanted a large family. So Bertha started grieving early in her adulthood, though. Her brother passed away when she was only 18.
Oh, wow, that's sad.
Could you imagine? Her brother, Hilmar, was born on November 25th, 1911, and passed at the early age of 2 years old on August 7th, 1914, due to something called microcephaly. Microcephaly is a birth defect that causes a baby's head to be smaller than expected for their age and sex. It can occur when a baby's brain doesn't develop properly during pregnancy or stops growing after birth. So their body grows, but their skull can't grow, and so there puts pressure on the brain.
Oh, okay.
She honored Hilmar later in life by namesaking her son after him when he was born in 1926. So he passed away in 1914, and then she had a son in 1926. And we'll talk about Hilmar, the namesake, here in a little bit. Right before she married her husband, Mr. Albert Nebgen, at 28 years old, he had to complete a draft registration card. So on record, you can see the drafts for anyone that had to do a draft back then.
Very interesting.
It stated that on June 5th, 1917, that he had a dependent. And I found this really interesting, so I had to dig into it. The dependent was his mom. So I guess back in the day, if you had a dependent, it was just like kind of jury duty like we have now. You could put someone on there. So it was his mother, and I thought, wow, being at 28, why is mom a dependent?
Right.
So I had to do some research on that, and I found a little bit information. So we'll talk about that in a minute. The year prior to the draft registration, Albert's dad passed away with peritonitis septic from appendicitis. So dad actually died from appendicitis, which is scary.
That's painful.
Yeah. I had appendicitis in 9th grade, and it's not fun. I can imagine back in the day, the kind of, technology they had compared to what we have now.
Right.
That had to be a painful death. This left Albert's mom a widow, of course, and after doing research, it appears she dealt with multiple neuritis. Multiple neuritis is a condition that causes inflammation or of many or all of the peripheral nerves. Sorry if I say anything wrong. I am not a doctor. It can cause weakness, numbness, and burning pain in roughly the same areas on both sides of the body. That's very miserable. So I can understand why Albert had to become the independent, or the mom was dependent on him.
Right.
Bertha was just about to enter a marriage and took on the burden of caring for Albert's mom so he can continue working on the farm. So as they're coming into this marriage, she was already, being a dependent. So, having to get married, that's a big load to take on.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard to take care of an adult when you're supposed to, just starting your life. To me, this is just incredible that she had the patience and the willingness to do so. Another interesting fact on this draft card stated that her soon-to-be husband dealt with stomach problems. And we know what kind of women it takes to deal with sick men. So that just puts into perspective what Bertha really was dealing with. A man who was sick in his stomach all the time, probably because he had a lot of things on his mind as farming. He's laughing because he knows men that are sick, man.
I was just thinking it could be because of her cooking too. I'm just saying.
They weren't married yet, so it's back in the day. They weren't in the same house yet. I don't know.
You never know, though.
I mean, it's his food that he's putting out on the farm, right?
That's true.
Maybe it was the feed. All right. Soon after, her brother Hilmar passed away, and the draft World War I registration was completed by her soon-to-be husband. Bertha married her husband on January 24th of 1918. This was a very busy time for they just started construction on his house. Or so Albert started construction on his house before marrying Bertha, and he's in a process of finishing this 2-story home. Back in the day, they didn't have homes like this. There was one of its kind, and it started building Fredericksburg up to what we know for what it is today. This home has lots of historical facts that can be explored. Now, we didn't know that when we looked at Leo. I found this out after researching, and now I kind of want to go back to go look at it.
Absolutely, for sure.
I do know that across from the cemetery, we did get to see Lyndon B. Johnson's property. That's pretty cool, too, if you guys haven't gone out there and seen that. The land the house was built on was actually given to Bertha's mother-in-law, so Albert's mom, when Albert's father passed away. The deed for Albert's father was very specific on how Albert was to pay for the land in $100 increments to his mother up to $3,000. So he paid $6,000 for the property. The deed split it in half between Albert and his brother, and then he had to pay the $3,000 back. That was 255.3 or 3/4 of acres. So 255, 3/4 acres. This land was split up and was given, like I said, half of it to Albert and Bertha. Bertha was very busy with the care of her mother-in-law and being a wife and a stay-at-home mom. So on most of where I would look at for the census, it would say she was at stay-at-home mom. So it didn't look like she had any other career besides that. For the next 20 years, she would give birth to 11 children, with baby Leo being the firstborn. The first 6 children were born at the Nebgens family home. Marcus was born on September 30th, 1919. Maida, September 20th, 1921. Leo, the namesake of baby Leo, so it gets a little bit confusing. So I'll refer to baby Leo and then just Leo. And this is the Leo that was born on December 23rd, 1923. Elmer, the namesake of Bertha's brother, was born on February 7th, 1926. Annie, April 9th, 1928. And that was the date of Annie's birthday. Noted that Albert always reminded her that it snowed in the hill country that day. So on April 9th, 1928, it snowed enough in Texas in the hill country that it covered the hillside.
I bet you that was pretty.
Oh, yeah. I love to see, like, just all the snow and then just flat and then rolling hills. The next 2 children were born at Bertha's mother's house at Rocky Hill. Andrew was born on July 7th, 1930, and James, August 24th, 1932. The final 3 children were born in a house adjoining the farm. From J.H. Bright. Evelyn, September 7th, 1934. Herbert, August 22nd, 1937. And finally, to complete the family, Alice was born on December 5th, 1939. In 1934, the Nebgen family was busy as Albert was working diligently to raise corn in the pastures. He began leasing and farming the adjoining John Harvey Bright place. John's wife was Lyndon B. Johnson's aunt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so John was actually a school teacher in Houston.
Interesting.
They moved into Bright's home with 7 children because it was larger as they were still growing the family. So when we started this journey for Bertha, she had just gotten married and moved. They were building the house. Now they're up to 7 children, and they had to move and lease the Bright's home because they have a bigger family and they just outgrew the house. What was interesting that I saw was, you know how he was a teacher in Houston, Mr.
Yeah.
Bright? Mr. and Mrs. Bright would come home with the family every summer and use that Nebgens home that they built as their summer home for many years.
Interesting. That's cool.
So it's kind of like they switched homes.
Right.
She had to say goodbye to her second son, Marcus, on January 6, 1942, because he was called up to the draft, number 32, for selective services at the age of 22. He had to report to Fort Sam Houston the same year. In July of 1942, Bertha's son Leo registered for the 5th National Registration Day for Selective Service Military Training, and he received his order number of 10,821. At some point, we know that Hillmore was given an order number of 11,024 for selective services, but I couldn't confirm what year that happened. Marcos, Leo, and Hilmar, her sons, served in World War II. I think that's pretty incredible. So we know
Absolutely.
she probably had a lot of stress on her. I couldn't imagine my child leaving for the war. Helmar also was a scoutmaster and a captain with the fire chief in the Stonewall Fire Department. Andrew, James, and Herbert, the younger sons, they served in Korean War. And Herbert was also an Eagle Scout. So they were big in the Boy Scouts, but they were also very big into serving in the wars. I'm not sure if that was by choice or just by they were chosen from the draft. That's interesting because we don't have that as of yet. I hope that never happens again.
I'll go ahead and say this on behalf of us to that family. Thank you for your service. We greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. So in 1945, Bertha and Albert sold their homestead to a man called Adolphe Diaz on June 8th for $5,000. Now remember, Albert's father bought that land for $3,000 because it was just half the land.
Oh, okay.
And so he sold it in $5,000 in 1945. Mr. Diaz then went and sold the property again in 1959. So we're not talking about too many years later. What is that? About 14 years?
Yeah.
It sold for $10,500.
That is crazy.
That's a huge profit for 1959. On New Year's of that same year, Bertha was 48 years old, and her first sibling, Dilka, is Thekla. So I'm sorry if I pronounce it incorrectly. She unfortunately passed away when Bertha was 48. She was really young. At the age of 51, she had to say goodbye to her mom, as she was called to the Lord on September 12th, 1947. So she's gone through a lot of death already in her life, and she's only 51 right now. Not too long ago, at the age of 53, her father passed away on October 12th, 1953. So she didn't have any parents after 53 years old.
Wow.
And I know his dad passed away of COVID, so it just puts in perspective of losing your parents so quickly and how precious life is. Mr. Nebjen died on January 24th, 1965. The interesting fact on that was he passed away on their wedding anniversary.
Oh.
And was honored by the Gillespie County Old Teamsters at their annual reunion on Labor Day of that year. So anytime someone passed away that was on the Teamsters, the
Right.
union, they would honor them, which was kind of cool to see.
Yeah, that's cool.
His death was caused by acute coronary thrombus due to coronary heart disease, so probably a heart attack. Bertha had a big giving heart, and she served her community and also taught her children about giving back. It's noted in the newspaper that both Bertha and her daughter Annie was recognized on June 18th, 1980 through June 25th, 1980. They were campaign contributors for the Hill Country Memorial Hospital campaign funds. And that Hill Country Memorial Hospital is still there today.
Oh, wow.
So they made an influence for sure. So living in Stonewall was beautiful. That's right there in Fredericksburg. It's all about the same area. But it's also known from doing research that it's a very difficult place to raise a family and form a life. I think it's because it's out in, back then it was out in nowhere. So we didn't have the big cities surrounding it.
Technically right now it's still way out in the middle of nowhere, but it's worth the drive.
It is definitely worth the drive. Family meant everything to Bertha. She loved her kids and family so much. Up until the day Bertha passed away, the family would still have a reunion at Christmas in Stonewall, or right after Christmas. 4 of her children stayed in the hometown, but the remainder moved away. So every Christmas, after Christmas, they would all come and have a reunion.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, just up until the year she passed away. In 1988, the house that Albert and Bertha built during the first year of marriage became a Texas landmark on record. Again, I wish I would have known that because I would have loved to seen that house. I'm sure we saw it because I remember seeing the church and I remember seeing houses in that area right by the cemetery, but I didn't really look because I was more interested in baby Leo and the story behind that.
Right.
And it was really cold that day. So I would like to go back maybe when there's bluebonnets again.
Yeah, I think most of the Texas historic sites are labeled with like a plaque of some sort.
Oh yeah, so they have one on the house.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
so it's kind of cool that we really need to go out there and go see that, and hopefully
absolutely.
you guys can go out there and see it, and then you guys can go see the baby Leo, and then his parents are there, and then there's some other family members there. Maybe leave a rose, let them know that they mattered. So the marking that you were talking about actually reads a native Texan and the son of German immigrants, Albert Nebgen, 1889 to 1965, had his farmhouse built for his family in around 1918. The two-story plan house is the focal point of a farmstead that is representative of those established by the area's early German settlers. The front porch, originally open, was partially enclosed in 1921 to accommodate the growing family. So when they first built the house, they didn't have it enclosed.
Okay,
And I remember
okay,
seeing the houses, a lot of them had that porch,
yes,
but then they ended up having to take that and make it into a room for the growing family. The home remained in the Nebgens' ownership until 1945. That's what the marking says, and we know that it's been sold. If you ever like to go visit Bertha or baby Leo, please go visit and leave them a token of love at St. Mary's Cemetery in Fredericksburg, Texas. You can also go see this landmark for the house. It is at the same area. The location from Stonewall is take RR 1623 south, approximately 1 mile to Leroy Behrens Road. Take Behrens east approximately 6/10 of a mile to the DE Ranch. Entrance. Take DE Road approximately 4/10 of a mile. This episode was created before, like I said, before knowing all this information, and to see how it all connected with the historical attributes this podcast was able to explore was amazing. I just have to say, I think it's incredible to see how strong that mom was.
absolutely.
And we know that men take on a different role. So he had to be strong because he had, his mom to take care of and worry about. He had his 11 children to take care of. He had his wife to take care of during all those pregnancies. I just think this family is just incredible. There are some bonus information I would like to put in this podcast, and maybe we'll do this often, of things that I found interesting while doing the research. So in 1943, Mr. Nebgen had to serve on jury duty, and it was all men on the jury, which was shocking to me, but it shouldn't be shocking because I've been through history class. I found it interesting that in the majority of the 1900s, jury duties consisted of just men. I did find in 1955 in the newspapers out there in the Harper Herald, there were 3 women named for the jury list. So that's a long time, for men to have to serve, who was working on the farm and had to be, moved away. First son, baby Leo's death certificate stated that he died on October 1st. So we know that he was born later on in October. So I find it very interesting that there are court documents. The death certificate says that he died October 1st, which he wasn't even born yet. So his birth certificate says a date after his death certificate, which is really weird to me. It should have stated November 1st. So there's human error for sure. There was also one of the birth certificates for the Bertha's children, and it stated that Bertha was a farmer when it should have said housewife because
Oh
she was
wow,
not a farmer. So back then, I guess because we didn't have computer checking, there was a lot of errors. I mean, I found 2 just researching this family.
that's crazy.
All right. So we are about done with this podcast. We apologize for any mispronunciation of names during today's podcast. It This is your family. We want you to know that we hold the highest respect for the persons or persons mentioned today. We don't just choose anyone random, and we take careful thought in respecting the families of these stories. Remember, you are more than a stone with a name on it. Be kind, be loving, and you too will continue to inspire generations to follow. Thank you for being with us on our first podcast, and we can't wait for episode 2.
Y'all have a great evening.